Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another video. Now, the most astute of you will realize that I'm not in the room that I normally record videos in, and that is because I moved. I no longer live in the same house that I did previously, so now this is going to be the new aesthetic. I hope you guys like it. I guess it's somewhat presentable for now. But I've been meaning to make a response to one of StarTalk's most recent episodes in which Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sam Harris have a conversation for about 15 minutes. And then the other 35 minutes is a conversation with people who were not advertised. I will put the link down in the description for the full podcast, so if you can go ahead and listen to it on your own. But for now, let's get started.
So Andrew, which camp are you in this illusion of free will?
Well, I do think that we have free will, but I think the biggest question that we have to answer is how are we defining it? What do we mean when we say we have free will? I think when Sam is talking about it, he has this sense that there's sort of like this person that says, I'm going to raise my arm, and then I raise my arm. But a lot of the way our brain works is that our will kind of happens naturally. When I'm talking, what I'm saying, I don't think about what I'm going to say before I say it. It just comes out. And in that regard, that mystery that he's talking about, I think that's really where the will is. The problem is that when you actually try to find it, when you're looking at a scientific way of looking for it, it gets pretty hard to find because you can find all these other things going on, these neural connections and all this stuff going on in the environment that affects the way we make a decision.
I agree that we have to define free will very carefully if we're going to make claims about its existence. But the definition that compatibilists such as Newberg here make is one that differs greatly from the vast majority of the population. For instance, when polls are conducted, most people define free will as the ability to have done otherwise known as a libertarian version of free will. The dictionary definition of free will is the power of acting without the constraints of necessity or fate, the ability to act on one's own discretion. Webster's definition is a bit different. Webster's has it at voluntary choice or decision, freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by prior causes or by divine intervention. Now, we do know that prior causes do affect our decision-making abilities in ways that are completely out of our control. Something that your brain subconsciously picks up can greatly influence your future decisions. Now, we know that libertarian free will can't be correct because we know that the brain makes a decision a maximum of 8 seconds before we're even consciously aware of it. And this isn't even taking into consideration the environmental or psychological factors that influence our decisions in an uncomfortably large manner. This is in line with determinism, the idea that events are determined by causes external to our will. The free will that most people believe in, and the ones that the dictionary definitions seem to lean more towards, though I will admit there's some wiggle room there, is that of libertarian free will. This is not the free will that you are defending. You are effectively trying to change the definition of free will in order to make it compatible with determinism, hence the name compatibilist. I'm a big believer in the idea that we have to be very careful in defining words. We have to be precarious about the way we word things. And because of this, I would argue that the conversation should not be about whether or not free will exists, but rather about whether or not it even matters if it exists.
So Godfrey, you think you got free will when you're telling jokes?
Well, yeah, I have free will. Listen, all this mystery to the brain stuff, all right? Here's the reason why he even sounded confused when he was talking about the free will. Because he paused, he was like...
It's called being mindful of what you're saying. Sam Harris wrote a book about free will and has spoken about the topic numerous times. Say what you will about his stance on the topic, he understands what he's talking about.
Right.
So let me ask a moral question.
Yeah.
So Charles Whitman,
right.
Let's say he was not killed on the roof of the tower at University of Texas, and they find the tumor, they operate, remove the tumor, now he's just fine.
Right.
Does he get prosecuted for killing the 14 people?
Well, he would get prosecuted, but he would probably make the argument that he...
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I've been involved in these trials. And,
I'm asking you.
Well, you'd probably prosecute him, and if he...
No, what? I'm asking you, a neuroscientist.
Right.
We just cured this guy of a heinous act.
Right.
He's not capable of that ever again. Does he go to jail?
Oh, can you prove to me that he never can do it again?
No, if you can show to me that that was leaning on his amygdala,
right.
and made him dangerous, and now he's not dangerous, and we have confidence enough in your field
right.
to assert that as expert testimony.
I don't know if I would have that confidence.
You should go to jail, dude. Because he's proved you killed these people.
Yeah, he did.
Well, and also,
You're going, but maybe he won't remember.
So to what extent should we be held responsible for our actions if we are victims of our own neuropsychology?
Well, again, to me, I think we still have a certain degree of responsibility because it's also how we deal with all of those other environmental aspects. And so when you look at Hitler, for example, as an example, yeah, he had a lot of genes and various issues that went into what made him who he is.
Issues, he called them issues.
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 He had a lot of issues.
I think you have issues.
He
You're
was like
a little hateful.
the most issueist person there ever was.
Right? Okay. Yes, absolutely. But I think part of the question is how did he handle all those issues, and is there some aspect of his own will that led him down a really horrible path, whereas other people who have been brought up in similar kinds of situations wind up doing great things in life?
This is undeniably an interesting question. This comes after a discussion that they had about the man named Charles Whitman, who went on a murder spree, possibly due to a tumor in his head that gave him violent tendencies. We're not sure that that's the reason why he did so, but just for the sake of the argument, let's say that the only reason why he murdered those people was because of that tumor in his head. I think we may actually harbor a more moral society in which we don't punish people for things such as revenge, retribution, or any other emotional impulse that doesn't actually make society a better place. We're really just harming people who have harmed others, and this kind of makes us feel better. But I think this is a pretty draconian and archaic way of structuring a society. I would argue that the more moral way of running a society is by finding the most effective method of reducing the amount of total harm done to society. This would include rehabilitating people rather than punishing them, ensuring that they no longer pose a threat to society. So the case of Charles Whitman is interesting. If the tumor in his head really was the only reason why he went on a murder spree, and the doctors managed to remove the tumor, therefore removing all of his violent tendencies, and he no longer poses a threat to society, should he still be in prison? And this would really apply to just about everybody. Someone who's a genius at mathematics is that way because he was born with the mental capacity to become a genius at mathematics. Someone who is a murderer because he was born with the neurological tendencies to become one. And you might argue, okay, well, if someone is born with the brain of a murderer, then why should we punish him? If he has absolutely no say in what he does or how he thinks or how he acts, why should we punish him? Isn't that just as immoral? I would argue that, yeah, sure, that might be the case, but the person who was being raped and murdered also didn't have a say in them being raped or murdered. So the whole point of the argument is that no matter what, we're going to encounter situations such as these. And the best way to go about it would be finding the most effective method of lowering the amounts of harm done to society in total. If we manage to know for a fact that a murderer is rehabilitated completely and no longer poses a threat to society, then I can't find a morally justified reason as to why we should continue to punish them.
But surely science at some level can inform morality, if not define it?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think we can certainly look to science as a way of helping us to understand the parts of our brain that do help us to be moral. On the other hand, whenever anybody says to me, we should turn to science to help us be moral, I ask them, how many scientists do you actually know? Because when you look at scientists, they're every bit as crazy and nasty and cutthroat as everybody else in this world.
I would say every bit.
This is something that I'll probably be making a video about in the future, the link between morality and science. Stay tuned, folks.
A lot of people who are atheists will say, well, how could people believe in something when there's no evidence? But that depends on how you define evidence. When we look at evidence in a biomedical paradigm, we want a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. But that's different than what a philosopher thinks is evidence, or a physicist thinks is evidence, or a theologian thinks is evidence. So when people say, if you go to a church and you say, do you have evidence that God is in your life? A lot of the people there will say, absolutely.
Whoa, slow down there, Speed Racer. This is certainly a bad take on evidence. If you're going to argue that personal or introspective experiences can count as evidence, then you're going to have to go through a good amount of mental gymnastics to try to justify this. Yes, people have powerful religious experiences, but there are people out there who speak and feel with the same level of certitude that they were abducted by aliens, just as there are religious people out there who claim that they felt the presence of God. And just as the former is not evidence that there are aliens out there abducting us, the latter is not evidence for an omnipresent God, or that this is the same God as the God of the Bible, or the Quran, or the other thousands of gods that have existed in humanity's history. These personal experiences can easily be explained neurologically with the absence of a supernatural creator. And if you want to make a claim that different scientific disciplines use different metrics of evidence, that by no means justifies forcing a different metric of evidence for religion, one that is not based on any replicable methods, has not advanced medicine or technology, and makes unfalsifiable claims that are at complete odds with everything that we know about reality. And even if different sciences use different metrics for evidence, none of these disciplines contradict one another. Biology can be explained by physics at the molecular level, and so can chemistry. All of these scientific disciplines work tremendously well with one another. And at the end of the day, they still use the same methods for evidence, forming a hypothesis, uncovering data, making predictions. Let's go back to the dictionary. Evidence, the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. People can have religious experiences as byproducts of the brain. That's a fact. In fact, the guy speaking here, Newberg himself, has written papers indicating this. God being the cause of religious experiences is not a fact. It's not even evidence. If you're a Christian having a religious experience about God, then that contradicts a Muslim having a religious experience about Allah. These are two completely different gods with different histories, different books, different conceptions of morality, different expectations. They can't be the same God. And that's not even taking into consideration the thousands of other religious experiences that people have had of completely different gods, gods that are absolutely incompatible with any Abrahamic religions. Religious experiences are not compatible with one another. They contradict each other and are easily explained as phenomena of the mind. Anyways, this is all I really wanted to discuss about in this podcast. It goes on for another 30 minutes or so, but they really only go into topics that I don't find particularly interesting. I just wanted to talk on these specific issues that I think that the comedian and Newberg were severely confused on. I'll put the full link to the podcast below if you guys want to go ahead and check it out, listen for yourself, form your own conclusions. That's perfectly fine, but that's where I'm going to end the video here. So anyways, fellas, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and see ya.